Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hi, everybody, and good evening here from Finland in our little temple of silence. We're into some very interesting subjects at the moment, the whole question of the dweller, and I think there were 17 or 18 points regarding it. I think we got as far as point number 7. I'd just like to welcome you here and to say hi then to Annette and Aurea and Beata. And there's someone coming in who's on a number. Okay. Carl. Hi, Carl and Catherine. Chris. Cindy and Frida and Georgina. Gretchen. Heike. Jan. Jessica. Joan. Johi. Karen. Kim, Leslie, Lorianne, and Mariana, Mariut, Martha, Martine, Rebecca, Risto, Stacia, and Yvonne, and Zenaidi. Someone may have popped in there that I didn't see. Annette, Aurea, Beata, yeah. Well, okay, I may have missed one or two people. Sorry for that, but I can't do too much more than go over your welcome one time. And over here on the staff side, BL and Joe and Michael Stacy and myself. We've been working with this, very, very interesting, kind of reviewing it just a little bit, about the positive dweller and the negative dweller, and the switch from the positive to the negative, which is very important as we begin to overcome that dweller. I'm not going to read it all, but go back there and before point number 5, read the first few points, which tell us about how the dweller dynamics function. We're learning how to steady our dweller, it tells us, and thus control the lower nature through the light of the soul. We're learning to hold the mind steady in the light and to control, as Patanjali tells us, the modifications of the versatile psychic nature, which includes kama, kama manas, and lower mind. So we're increasingly oriented towards reality and away from the great illusion. And the dweller and the angel are brought into closer and closer rapport. Then point 6, as we went over last time, in the earlier stages, the dweller is positive and the soul is negative in their effects in the 3 worlds of human endeavor. Then there is the period of oscillation, leading to a life of equilibrium, sort of Gemini, Libra, air sign kind of things, wherein neither aspect appears to dominate. That's often said of Libra, that neither the higher or the lower pair of opposites dominates until Scorpio changes all that. And after that, and usually under the drastic assertion of the Scorpio energy, the balance changes and the personality steadily becomes more negative, and the soul or psyche becomes dominant and positive. That's the positive soul, and the result is called the reversal of the wheel. And there's a lot of reversing that goes on and a lot of struggle in the fifth petal of the egoic lotus, which is kind of interesting because that petal related to Leo, or the positive dweller. It's related to Scorpio because all the love petals have to do with water. At first, cardinal water, Cancer, then fixed water, Scorpio, that's the fifth petal, and then mutable water, Pisces. And also because when you're thinking of something that's in the middle of 9, as 5 is, you would naturally think of Libra as being the balance point of the various signs. So I think a lot of people then, for a fairly long period of time, struggle with that fifth petal, and by the time they're completed with it in terms of opening, then, as you know, the first initiation has been taken. So it's a wide range, all the way from very strong selfish attitude to the growing humility that takes place with the first initiation. The reversal of the wheel. And basically, it's not that the signs necessarily move backwards or forward or something like that. It's more that the energy flows within the etheric body change direction. Usually energy comes in and stimulates the lower centers, but with the reversal of the wheel, maybe the higher centers capture those incoming energies and stay with them. And another thing that happens is that the lower centers send the energy back to their related higher center, with the sacral sending to the throat and the solar plexus to the heart, and eventually the base of the spine sent to the head center. So that takes us into point number, I think, 7, which is about the astrology, a little bit about the astrology of the dweller and the angel. Of course, you can, in a way, find this in your sun sign and your rising sign. Now I'll explain that in just a minute. The astrological influence can potently affect these situations. And speaking generally, and within certain esoteric limits, he qualifies what he's going to say, it might be noted that, let's see what might be noted here. Leo controls the positive dweller, and we all know that the dominant or dominating Leo energy can lead to egotism and centralization, where the eyes are always upon the little self. And it's a very great limitation of identity. And, the Leo, the king of beasts, is king. And that goes on for quite a while until it becomes very dissatisfying. And we hope that the crises come upon such people in a way that points out the inadequacy of letting, of being sort of a king over a petty country, as it were, a very limited country, and not one's full identity at all. Then comes this Gemini stage, back and forth, oscillating between the soul and the personality, with growing centralization within the higher of the pairs of opposites. You don't even encounter the pairs of opposites in the vertical sense until you reach the second series of petals. As a matter of fact, what the Hall of Ignorance is really all about is not that you're necessarily incapable of thinking or feeling. It has to do with the fact that you just don't consider the higher. There is no God within. And then when the water petals, the love petals, the emotional petals begin to be active, then the sense of God within as the kind of inner ruler, higher power, whatever you want to call it, begins to dawn. And then, speaking of the science of triangles, which we've been studying, here comes Sagittarius, in which the dweller turns negative. And it is, shall we say, begins to aspire towards something other than itself. The personality feels its own inadequacy and directs its desire aspirationally towards a higher goal, and is kept on the narrow path of discipleship. So this really is a stage preceding initiation, but a very important directed stage where we finally escape from Leo being that positive dweller, that attitude of I am the center of the world, and everything revolves around me. And, we call such a person who is badly afflicted by that, we call them narcissists. And if it goes too far, we call them megalomaniacs. And a number of people in the past and present sort of begin to feel that excessive overvaluation of themselves and their importance. So here's the triangle. Look for triangles everywhere. That's what we try to do when we study the science of triangles. And here is the Leo, Gemini, Sagittarius triangle ruling the dynamics of how the positive dweller turns negative to the soul. And the reversal of the wheel occurs within the energy system, and it's as if via an arrow of aspiration, the lower energies below the diaphragm are in a way shot into the higher chakras, not without struggle, not without trouble, not even without disease, because the friction of the back and forth can lead to diseased conditions, and it can go on for quite a while. If you think about the word dis-ease, it's a frictional state, and it indicates that things are not running smoothly, and that there is a problem with inflammation, which is a Martian problem, and it has to do with how we shall direct our desires and how we shall change them into a more elevated form we call aspiration. It might be added, looks like we've got another triangle coming up here. I mean, we don't just have to wait for that particular class where we're studying the science of triangles. We can, spot the triangles anywhere. Eventually, all these things begin to come together, and it's like studying one big book, all the many books. It might be added that the three signs, Scorpio, Sagittarius, and Capricorn, lead finally to the fusion of the dweller and the angel. And we call this the soul-infused personality, increasingly so. Two of these signs induce humility. You're in the middle of very terrible struggles, and you're forced to your knees in Scorpio, which incidentally rules to the intuitive level on which there's a dying out of the kind of illusion and glamour. I mean, you see things from the perspective of the transcendental mind, which is Mercury, and you see from the point of view of the Buddhic plane, which is ruled by Scorpio, and the dweller is not sustained anymore, and the illusions and glamours fold and lose their power over you. Now, Scorpio is pretty much connected with the 8th petal of the egoic lotus, and also, as I've been saying, with the 5th petal. The 8th petal is the middle fire petal of sacrifice, and when the egoic lotus is completely open, there's lots of activity in the 8th petal, and you've taken the 2nd initiation. With Sagittarius, you are, and you're on your way to the mountain. You have the vision of the mountain. You go to the foot of the mountain, and you begin to climb in Capricorn. And I would say you begin to climb into the synthesis petals in a very a definite kind of way. The synthesis petals are always opening up after every initiation, but they really start to open there in the Capricorn phase. And Capricorn stands there for a great sign of initiation, and especially the 3rd initiation. So by that time, you're pretty much the soul-infused personality. Maybe not completely. Maybe right before the 4th initiation, there is as much soul infusion as you're going to get. But already at the transfiguration, when you meet the light supernal, on the mountaintop, it's Capricorn, it's Venus, it's the light supernal, it's transfiguration, it's the synthesis in the light. So these 3 signs are very important for the fusion of the dweller and the angel, and we can begin to say, well, we're really a 3/4 infused personality, and then 100%, I suppose, by the 4th initiation. So these are interesting astrological factors. It doesn't mean that everybody that's got this Scorpio, Sag, Capricorn representation is going to do this. It depends on what stage of general causal development you find yourself at. That always has to be assessed before you know what the energies are going to be when they impact your form. So we have to study the form first and see its general level of evolution before we know whether we're dealing with the undeveloped man, the developing man, or the true disciple initiate. Now let's go on to point number 8. I think these are really so very practical. Oh yes, and I did want to mention this, that on a strictly personal basis, it's as if your sun sign is the positive dweller, and your rising sign represents the negative dweller, or the influence of the soul in the mastery of the dweller. So just think for a minute of your sun sign, your rising sign, and how it is when the personality asserts itself rather dominantly in your case, my case, what is it about that assertion which leads to the positive dweller? What kind of behaviors are involved there? What kind of tendencies are operative? And then, of course, the rising sign comes in and strengthens the soul when the rising sign is properly used, and weakens the dweller. So when you think about it, your sun sign weakens when the rising sign comes in, and the sun sign is then made into kind of a subsidiary energy when compared with the rising sign wielded by the soul. your rising sign, if you use it correctly. Of course, you can also use it in a personal and incorrect way, but when you use the rising sign correctly, it's going to weaken or make the dweller negative. And then there will be the ascendancy of the rising sign, and it will lead increasingly to the center of soul life. So every once in a while, kind of take your pulse regarding these two signs and see how you're doing in their balance. Are you acting out of your positive dweller, or has the dweller turned negative because the soul is using the rising sign? And, you know, it can take years, naturally, for that kind of transition to occur. Point 8 here is that the soul ray controls and conditions the activity of the angel and its type of influence upon the dweller. It affects karma. I mean, our solar angel is a little lord of karma, times and seasons. In other words, when it's right for certain things to happen. All of that is supervised by such presence as there is of the solar angel within the causal body egoic lotus. So think of it then, your soul ray, what is it? And the angel, maybe we can call it, when we think about what is that angelic presence within our causal body, maybe we can think of it as the angel of the presence, rather than the entirety of the solar angel, which is so powerful that it would have a destructive effect if it were entirely incarnated in that higher mental vehicle we call the causal body. So the soul ray controls and conditions the activity of the angel and its type of influence on the dweller. How is your soul ray, provided you know it, conditioning or influencing the dweller? Maybe you have an easy access, maybe the ray of the dweller or the sign connected with the dweller is harmonious with the ray of the soul, and maybe it's not. Maybe you have a lot of first ray in some way coming through your dweller, and a second ray soul is trying to control that first ray dweller. Well, that's going to be frictional. So just be aware of the kind of struggle that this can bring, or the kind of cooperation which is likely when the rays and the signs are more or less on the same line. I mean, for instance, if you have like a second ray soul and and you're born with the sun in Virgo, or the sun in Gemini, or the sun in Pisces, all three of those signs conduct the second ray. So the second ray soul will be attempting to subdue a second ray dweller, basically. And plus you have to add in the personality ray as well. See, it's sort of like the sun sign plus the personality ray give you the dynamics of your dweller, and the soul ray plus the indications of the rising sign give you the dynamics of that which renders the dweller negative. That is the soul dynamics. So that's a very simple exercise, and as you ponder those two things, soul ray rising sign versus personality ray sun sign, you get a picture of the struggles that you may be going through as you try to produce the soul infused personality. Now, all kinds of inner adjustments are being made by the soul. What does it say? Karma, times, seasons, all very Saturnian things. Now it's time for this, now it's time for that. There's a regulation that comes from the soul ray and the rising sign. And one day, maybe not too long from now, we'll be able to trace ray cycles in our energy system just the way now we can fairly easily trace astrological cycles through transits, progressions, directions. Things begin, things end. We can do that astrologically. It's harder to trace ray cycles. But at the same time, when astrological cycles change, the rays associated with those changing astrological cycles also change. Like, for instance, suppose for many years you've had a Cancer rising sign, let's say, and then comes the time when the ascendant is going to ingress into Leo. Well, not only will the astrological quality change in terms of how you approach the soul, but the ray qualities will change. We'll be moving from a third and seventh ray emphasis into a first and fifth ray emphasis, and then you have to trace that in your life. So it may seem like a lot of intricacy, but if you want to master your cycles, you've got to know some of these factors. Now let's see. I think we can maybe do a few more. Number 9. The personality ray, I think some of this I've already said. The personality ray controls the dweller in all the earlier states. Now remember, the personality ray doesn't even emerge for many people for a long time. You've got, a lot of people are simply kamic and desirous, and they, or kama-manasic, and maybe not so many are real personalities. But that's coming more and more as Leo becomes more powerful in humanity's horoscope. We're going to have a lot more individuals, where a personality ray will come out and be a controlling, dominating factor. In the Hall of Ignorance, it really isn't. There isn't what you would normally call a personality. By the time we start getting toward the fourth and fifth petal, a personality begins to emerge. So the personality ray controls the dweller in all the earlier states, and up to the time when the soul ray begins steadily to produce a growing effect. And that's, going to be a time of contention, a time of friction, a time of contest between two tendencies. Now, as we all tend to recapitulate what has gone on before, at various times in our life, maybe we will relive what was a much longer period earlier on in our development. And we'll go through that shorter period where the soul and personality are really fighting it out, only to give way, let us say, to a smoother soul domination. It's just a question of, figuring out where you are. And I suppose DK said, I thought of it today again. He says, the older you are, the easier it is for the soul to work through the personality. So maybe when you look back upon some of your earlier life in this incarnation, the struggle might have been greater until you win it. And then later in life, there's a smoother reception of the infusing soul. So the personality ray controls the dweller in all the earlier states and up to the time when the soul ray begins steadily to produce a growing effect. And, then you kind of get the midlife crisis that you deserve. It's mine and I deserve it. There's going to be a transition period from the personality to a line of development that is controlled by the soul ray. And we're told that for 2/3 of the man's development, it is the personality ray that's going to be controlling the livelihood, the vocation, the way of being in the world. And then for the last third or so, the soul quality begins to control how one lives in the world. The personality ray is, as you know, a combination of three energies which produce, we don't exactly know how, but there's a blending of some kind, which produce the fourth or personality ray through the medium of their interrelation over a vast period of time. So, etheric, physical, astral, and lower mental interact over a long period of time until a personality does emerge. Now, people like ourselves who are studying the ageless wisdom and our students of esotericism, we really have to assume that the personality ray has emerged and that there is a degree, at least, of personality integration. How much there is of personality soul integration and infusion is a variable factor, and you should keep your eye on it, and just which would mean, in a way, taking your eye off your strictly personal self. Okay, it's the togetherness of the two, of the soul and the dweller, which is our objective, and he will describe some unusual things about that fusion process. So let's see. Yeah, well, this is our story, and if we could simply have accurate vision of our own process over a number of incarnations, we would have a sense of how the soul ray is controlling the personality ray, which is basically controlling the dweller. And I would say that none of us is strictly ruled at this time by the personality ray. We just wouldn't be in this kind of work if we were. When you look out on the political, social, religious field, you see a lot of people that are really, really controlled by their personality ray, and they just want the pleasure, the enhancement, the satisfaction of their elemental personal nature. And people like ourselves look on and say, "Oh my goodness, you know, you're going over a cliff. You're going to have bad times. You know where this leads." But no, they don't know where it leads. And there's not too much that the experienced people can do to prevent them from going over the cliff and learning the hard way, which is too bad, of course. But later, you know, we do wake up and we say, well, a teacher like DK comes along and we've been through the school of hard knocks, and we know the suffering that's involved when you don't pay attention to the inner promptings, and we'll listen. We'll actually try to learn something from the teacher instead of blundering forward for another inauspicious episode of avoidable pain. Okay, I always like to see a therefore. So number 10 begins with the word therefore. The 5 types of energy which I indicated to you as of importance in your own lives when I gave you indications, as he says, indications, interesting. You know, it's not like a definite statement, although he did seem pretty definite at times, I must say. This is your soul ray, this is your personality ray. Anyway, he calls it indications, which I indicated to you as of importance in your own lives when I gave you indications as to the nature of your 5 controlling energies. He's leaving the monad out of it because these people and pretty much people like ourselves are not really yet monadically influenced, no matter what we might say on the subject. I gave you indications as to the nature of your 5 controlling energies, controlling rays, and they govern also the relation between the dweller and the angel, both in the individual and in humanity as a whole. And he's just repeating what we know here, or at least we know it from him, that these 5 are the rays of the physical body, and he includes the etheric there. Some people, I think mistakenly, say that the etheric body is on a different ray than the dense physical. I think that's incorrect, and I think that in all of the people that he, for whom he assigned rays of the etheric physical nature, he never differentiated on a ray basis. He may have discussed the relationship between etheric and physical, but the ray was the same. Okay, so these 5 are the rays of the physical body. The astral body is the mind ray, the personality ray, and the soul ray. So these rays are really governing, he's telling us, the relation between the dweller and the angel. Now, sometimes when we think of our rays, we may not actually think of dweller and angel, but there is within us a higher being called an angel of the presence, let's call it, which is an extension of the solar angel on its own plane. And maybe the fullness of the solar angel never leaves the cosmic etheric levels, the fullness of the solar angel. But having pervaded the entire universe, with a fragment of myself I remain, having pervaded the higher mental plane and its vehicle forming potentials with a fragment of myself. I, the solar angel, remain on the cosmic ethers. And basically, if I could, well, I can, and I can show you why I think so in what DK basically gave to us as a useful chart. And I'll go here, AAB diagrams, and here are some nice creative hierarchies for us. And I will go to the next one, and you will see that solar angels are listed here on the Buddhic plane, which is still the cosmic ethers. So if there's going to be a presence of a solar angel in this fifth creative hierarchy here, it has to be a projection from the Buddhic plane into the higher levels of the mental plane. And basically that all starts out, how does it start out? It kind of, the projection goes like this. It comes onto the third subplane at first of the mental plane. That's where the projection from the solar angel, the arrow from the solar angel shoots in the beginning, and later, millions of years later, the whole thing moves up to where it is pictured right there onto the second subplane, a change of frequency, a change in point of tension. It moves up to the second subplane. And by the way, I don't think that in general the egoic lotus ever moves to the third subplane where the monastic permanent atom is found. I know some people theorize just on the basis of analogy that it would do that, and I know, according to DK, that the causal body of the solar logos does move to the first subplane of the cosmic mental plane, but I think in the case of the human being, the destruction of the causal body occurs while the causal body is basically centralized on the second sublevel of the mental plane. Now, you know, we don't have to have all those technicalities in order to participate in the destruction of our causal body. We just basically have to, you know, the simple way of looking at it is we have to take what we have, sell what we have, give the money to the poor, and follow the Christ. It's a symbolic formula. You do that, and before you know it, that causal body is going to be destroyed. And of course, the story in the Bible is there was an initiate who couldn't do that. He didn't have it in him to do that, and he went sadly away. Of course, since that time, he too has achieved. Now let's see where we are here and whether it is, no, I think it is not worth going on right now. Because basically what we have next is the rays of which govern humanity as a whole during the Piscean age, and the different set of rays that will be governing humanity during the Aquarian age. And that's a whole separate subject, and we have to see how it will make a difference in the civilizations. So that's a whole unit of work all by itself. And I think we don't want to complicate things too much. So what I'll do is I'll take this before our little discussion on the matter. And I'll put it here so I know where I am next time. And that's finish, and that is 1, 2, 3, and that's that. Okay. And then this, and that we have now the end of our webinar program 153. We've been at it a long time, and today is the 7th of August. AU. It's so interesting that AU. So how it means gold and how it means the first and second ray together, and it means selfhood. It's so interesting. And then reading 93, and I think we got as far as, well,
We are on page 156 now.
Okay, very good. Wow, a whole page. We are really moving. So this will be 14, and it'll be a morning program. Try to alternate here, and okay, wait a second. Did we just finish 153 or 152? Do you know?
We are on program 153 now.
Okay. Today we've been on 153. So 154 starts, and it's going to be reading 94, and it's going to be from 156. All of these 17 points are about the dweller and the angel are really important. And so when you begin to think of your soul and personality ray in terms of angel and dweller, it changes your consideration of it, and it enriches the consideration. So just for a moment, just think about your angel and dweller and their relationship with each other. Anything that may come to you here. They really, can be quite different, and maybe you can identify those factors in your life which show that difference. And then, of course, you'll want to put in the rising sign soul ray as representing the soul, and the sun sign personality ray as representing the personality or the dweller. Just for a flash, just kind of ponder in those terms. And it's not only what they are, but the stage in the dynamic process between them, which is presently occurring. Because it is, a process over many years, really. and actually over a number of incarnations, even if the personality ray changes. The soul ray is probably not going to change very much or frequently, but the personality ray can change, and yet it's still the same personality in a way. And one of the ways of dealing with this, we're given some formulas: lead us from darkness to light, lead us from the unreal to the real, lead us from death to immortality, lead us from the individual to the universal, or I forgot one, lead us from chaos to beauty. And you can create a lead us formula. Lead us from, and then the qualities of your sun sign personality ray, to, and then the qualities of your soul ray, and the rising sign. See if you can do that. Just, you have to practice it, but just think of a little lead us formula that involves this angel and dweller issue. And of course, what it would be, it's more like, if it's not group work, it's individual work. It's lead me from X to Y. Maybe, think about that this week, and maybe we'll, if Michael will remind me, because I'm probably, going to forget, but maybe we can have a few of you share your sentence. And then when you have your mantram, you'll be able to kind of measure along a continuum how you're doing in terms of that change from X to Y, from dweller to angel. Could be interesting. And even instead of just like one formula, you could have a list of several formulas, one of which might really represent what's going on more than others. So try to keep that in mind, and maybe we'll have a chance to do that. I think it would be quite interesting. I'm already thinking in my own case, about those distinguishing dweller versus angel issues, and how I'm doing in terms of the lead me from this to that. Okay. Now, your thoughts, your questions, your whatever you might want to say or write or whatever. This would be the moment then to to do that, as we always try to do. So if you write in the chat box or raise your hand or whatever it is, we'll try to keep an eye open here for you. What have we done? Sometimes it helps to just review what we've done.
Michael, there
Yeah.
are many comments,
okay.
questions written in the chat box.
So we don't have to review in that way. Okay, good. So let's start fielding them.
Okay, from Suzanne. You also say seventh house cusp indicates dweller in this. Is that correct?
Open enemies. And as they say, and it's the home of Saturn. Let's just say in relation to Libra and the seventh house, Saturn is most important. Not only is Saturn, who is the dweller, exalted in Libra, but it is the hierarchical ruler. So it has kind of a double strength in everything associated with Libra. And, from a certain perspective, I mean, you always have to say from a certain perspective, the obstructiveness of the dweller is Saturnian, and the bounty, the broader picture, the greater possibilities of the soul are Jupiterian. And I'm just now speaking in a general way. I could reverse those and make a justification for them. But yes, when you are facing something at your seventh house cusp, the dweller is your partner. You, the soul, and the dweller are partners. And those adjustments between partners have to be worked out to bring about infusion. And of course, this is the place where the divine marriage takes place. Saturn is a sign a planet much associated with marriage, with the union, and it sets up the conditions of infusion of the personality by the soul. So the alchemical marriage is taking place there at the seventh house, and that is ultimately what has to happen with the dweller and the angel as the dweller becomes more and more purified. And we'll get into that. There are 5 stages coming up about the concerning the relationship between dweller and angel. And some of the later ones are really interesting because they seem to go on even to the 5th initiation. So yes, 7th house cusp, marriage partner, dweller, opponent, open enemy. And in old classical astrology, the 12th house is the hidden enemies. And they should not be discounted because for a while, one's own personal self is the enemy of one's higher nature. So the 12th house has to be considered also. Suzanne.
Frederick has written a number of comments. The first is, gratitude and blessings for today's inspiration. Is there any regulation between the dweller and the solar angel in a similar way DK described the regulation between the soul ray and the dweller?
Regulation. So it's a rule, regulus, in the same way that DK described, what was it, Michael, the regulation between the
regulation between the soul ray and the dweller.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. I want to, and then the soul ray, which represents the power of the soul, must tame the personality ray and the the sort of positive dweller. It has to tame it. But now the first part of the question was, is there any regulation between, and please repeat?
Between the dweller and the solar angel. In a similar way, DK describes the regulation between the soul ray and the dweller.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that is exactly where the regulation comes in. And maybe even influence of Regulus would come in when it's prominent in the chart, because it's called the heart of the lion, and the lion need not be the king of beasts. The lion can be a very positive soul instead of a positive dweller, overcoming the negative tendencies of the normal dweller. So I would say there is a relationship definitely between the soul ray, on the one hand, which must learn to dominate, and then the dweller and personality ray. And you have to look in your horoscope to find out what can assist the solar angel, or let's call it the angel of the presence, and that soul ray. What are the other factors of assistance which help overcome and subdue the dweller and make of it a subcategory and instrument of expression for the soul? See, we don't ever really throw the dweller away. We tame it, we train it, we subdue it so that it becomes an instrument of enhanced expression in the lower worlds. We use it. So I think, you're dealing with certain factors that are all interdependent, and in general, the answer to my thought about that is yes, there are relationships between the soul. See, what is the soul, basically? The soul is two things particularly. It is the extension of the consciousness of the monad into the higher mental plane, accompanied by the projection of the solar angel into that same field of consciousness. So you have, in a way, your own monadic but attenuated consciousness on the higher mental plane, and you have a special assistance of the projected solar angelic thought process, I-ness, ahamkara, whatever the solar angel has achieved. It is assisting the extended monadic consciousness on the higher mental plane. It's at least those two things. Now, when you add to it the master's input, and you become what's called an outpost of the master's consciousness, then what we normally call the soul is made up of three streams of consciousness: monadic extension, solar angelic projection, and the master's presence, so that we become an outpost of his consciousness. So then when we talk about the soul, we'll have a clearer idea, because it's possible to get very confused when we use the word soul. We don't know whether it's us, whether it is that higher entity that comes from a previous solar system, a solar Petri, a solar angel, whatever. What is it? And in a way, it's all those things. But especially, it is our monad in a new field of lower expression being enhanced by the presence of a higher entity that came from a previous major solar system and was trained on Sirius, namely a solar angel projected into the higher mental plane as an assist to the consciousness of the monad, which is dropped into a lower field of expression for a while until that lower field of expression is destroyed and we start our return to full monadic consciousness. So all of these factors are interplaying, and probably you can find relationships between all of them.
Next question from Frederick. What would be the origin from where the energy of the personality ray emerges? DK pointed out a combination of 3 energies.
Yep. Physical, elemental. See, somewhere in esoteric psychology, he talks about the little elemental lords and their rays, okay? So the physical elemental, the astral elemental, and the lower mental elemental combine in a manner over many years and even lifetimes to produce the possibility of an emerging personality with its ray. And the interesting thing is that, at least in my impression, is that the ray of the lower mind and the ray of the personality both are anchored on the lower mental plane. And I would say they're anchored on the 4th level from below of the lower mental plane. So it's elemental combination according to a kind of alchemy which is supervised by the soul, and that alchemy, we don't know how that is done, but the solar angel of the presence, is an expert in alchemy involving the atomic triangle, which is the mental unit, astral permanent atom, physical permanent atom. The solar angel of the presence plays upon those centers of force in an alchemical manner and produces the emergence of a 4th factor out of that elemental elemental presence. In other words, those lunar lords, they stay with us and they are alchemized into producing a 4th, just the way that 6 solar systems produce a 7th, just the way that any triangle produces a 4th, just the way the number 21 produces the number 22. See, we have 7 plus 7 plus 7 ruling different kinds of spirits and entities, and all 21 of them combine to make a 22 by a special power of combination. Now, what that is, we're going to have to leave that to the experts who are the trained alchemical agents, the solar angels. We don't know how they do that. We don't know, but there's a hint. There was a man, he was the astrologer of the group, actually. He was the sun in Virgo, and Sagittarius rising. His name was William Miller. His rays were 2nd ray soul, 6th ray personality, 1st ray mind, 1st ray astral body, 7th ray physical. And every one of his personality vehicles had a subray 6, 6, 6, and 6. Subray of the mind, 6. Ray 1 mind, 6 subray. Ray 1 astral body, 6 subray. Ray 7 physical body, 6 subray. And DK gave a hint and said that those subrays combined in such a manner as to produce in him a sixth ray personality. Now, does this mean that every one of us has an identical subray on the three lower vehicles? Like if I think I have a fourth ray personality, mind is, let's say, ray 3 for me, subray 4. Astral body, ray 6, subray 4. Physical body, ray 3, subray 4. Does that mean that those 3 4s combine to render a fourth ray personality? Well, I don't think we can answer that yet, but it is possible. And I'll tell you, there's an example of that, or why it might be so. Some people went into the spiritual triad and said, "Oh, my atmic vehicle is this ray. My Buddhic vehicle is this ray. My higher monastic vehicle is this ray." But DK says no. He says no. He says that the same ray rules each of those permanent atoms. So in other words, if you are a second ray soul, your triad, your monastic unit, monastic permanent atom is ray 2. Your Buddhic permanent atom is ray 2. Your atmic permanent atom, so we start with mental, Buddhic, and atmic permanent atom ray 2. And those 3 ray 2s together, when projected into the higher mental plane, give you a ray 2 soul. So there are some hints there about how you alchemize a triple unit into a fourth unit. There are little differences, but still, that's the idea.
Okay.
Yep.
Frida asks, can you comment on this dynamic between angel and dweller as it might affect nations versus individuals?
Yeah, well, I think we simply analogically extend the issue. Now, I can even go beyond the nations into the soul of humanity and the dweller of humanity. So the Great War, 1914 to 1945, was essentially between the soul of humanity and the dweller of humanity. Now, it's quite easy in a way to extend the analogy to the nations. Let's take the United States, since I'm doing a lot of thinking about it because it's so critical at the moment. It's got a second ray soul, second ray Aquarius soul, and a sixth ray Gemini personality. The dweller of the nation is extremely visible in terms of the competing idealisms which give no room for appreciation of the other point of view. Basically, we have a group of fanatical sixth ray souls who began to come into the States 100 years ago or so, and because of their stage of development, they care only for personal gratification, and it's very selfish. Then we have this broad humanitarian second ray soul, color indigo, whereas the other is color red, Mars. So basically what we've got going now is an angel dweller battle between the heart center, indigo, and the solar plexus center, red, Mars. And we've got a battle going on between the second ray and the sixth ray, and between Aquarius and Gemini. You can put all those things together, and you see a classic battle as to who will prevail. Will it be the soul of the nation? You know, one of the candidates said, we have to save the soul of America. Well, he wasn't far off. It's a battle for the soul of America, or will the Martian red conflictual Gemini personality prevail with all of its selfishness? So that's an example right there. And you can go into many different nations. You can go into Russia, you know, with its New Age aligned seventh ray soul and its fanatical sixth ray personality. You can go into United Kingdom, or let's call it Great Britain, as he does. You know, and the battle will be between the second ray soul, which is filled with fair play and right understanding, or the John Bull aspect of the first ray personality, which is selfish and materialistic and accumulative. And right now, maybe that's winning the day for a while. We could go into all kinds of nations and reproduce exactly on a parallel with the individual a battle which is occurring. And because, you know, a lot of individuals are more advanced than the nations in which they find themselves, we don't know whether we have any initiate nations per se. Maybe we do, but he hasn't really told us yet that we have initiate nations. So in every nation, the struggle to make the personality ray dominant over, or should we say the soul dominant over the dweller of the nation, is maybe not as far progressed as it is with many people within those nations. And that's one of the big things we have to do when we work esoterically with the nations, is get that soul to conquer the dweller and use it as a subset, or use it as an instrument or of expression. So the analogy, I think, is quite exact, and it has to be studied nation by nation.
Next, Suzanne shares, I nicknamed my dweller with the acronym DOT, D-O-T, and it helps to realize when she gnashes her teeth that I am much more than a mere dot and must act accordingly.
That's, you know, well, all I can say is good. We all have our methods, you know. If our job is to overcome the dweller and to train it in such a way that it becomes an instrument of expression, each one of us is going to have our own unique and often creative methods of doing that. And that's up to you and everybody else who tackles the job. DK can indicate it, but he can't tell you the exact method you're going to use to achieve. So this sounds like a good one for you, Suzanne, and hopefully, you know, it works progressively and, you know, gives you the achievement that you want and need. We all do it. We all need that achievement.
Next, Jan asks, every now and then the terminology of the human moon chain is mentioned. Could you share an explanation what the moon chain is? Is it still functioning as an effect now?
Only as a decaying effect. Basically, the moon is a dead planet, and its life has been transferred into our Earth chain, and hence a lot of the trouble right here on our planet with the conflict of the third ray moon tendencies with the second ray Earth chain tendencies. Here is a here, this one that is now called the Saturn chain, and we don't know by what means it has been changed, but it's a living thing. And the moon chain has succumbed to a decaying condition, such that as each round, and maybe it's the big rounds through all of these chains, as each round passes, the moon gets farther and smaller, less and less matter, until it completely disintegrates. And so it's not even pictured here. Only the chain which has substituted for it is pictured, and it's called the Saturn chain. And generally these chains within the whole planetary scheme are chakras, and you just cannot eliminate a chakra from the chakra system, because the system will not survive. So whatever's called here the Saturn chain took the place of the moon chain, and the moon still has a thought form effect and a timing effect, and anybody who follows it knows that many material conditions and psychological conditions do change when the moon changes position. So it may be dead, it may be decaying, it may vampirize. It's like a divine vampire. Well, not divine, it's like a subtle vampire, says Blavatsky. It may have some negative effects, like a corpse would have. You don't want a corpse sitting in your living room rotting away, but that's the effect of the present moon. But what DK does not discuss, though he shows it in these diagrams, is that a different chain has replaced the moon chain. And if you look at the planet Saturn, you'll see the moon in it. You'll see that crescent there, and it has to have a relation to the third ray, just the way the moon had a relation to the third ray, to the three aspects of the personality. So basically, these chains are chakras within the planetary scheme of Earth. And within every such chakra, there is a subsidiary set of chakras, another 7, which are the globes. So looking at the chain as if it were the superior kind of entity, it too has chakras, and the different globes are arranged geometrically in a certain way to indicate something about their condition, and except, of course, where it is not so arranged. If you look at what's called the Neptune chain and the Jupiter chain, all there is a conventional drawing of 7 points, and we don't even know, what the geometry would be. But if you look at the Mercury chain, look at that geometry. If you look at the Venus chain of our Earth scheme, look at the geometry, and it's very different from the Earth itself. Here's a square, here's a pentagon, here's something that's unusually shaped. It's kind of like a pentagram, but it's not complete. He's telling us something here about the chakric function of these different chains. So that's the disappearing moon chain, which has been absorbed by our fourth or Earth chain. And now we have moon chain people here, we have Earth chain people here, and we have a big conflict between the two tendencies, because the moon chain people never got a chance to finish their development, because the moon chain was interrupted by the solar logos because it was going so wrong. So basically that whole thing was destroyed. The lives were transferred to the fourth chain, and now on the fourth chain where we live now, we have even more stressful condition where twice as much has to be handled as would normally be the case, plus the friction between the third ray and the fourth ray, second ray. So you're not going to see a picture here of the moon chain, it's gone. But the moon is like that decaying body, and it's still here, and it has a, as Blavatsky says, a nefarious effect upon the earth chain.
And the final question before going into the dissipation meditation, Leslie asked, what did DK say in externalization about the Scandinavian bloc during the Great War? He seemed to share some accolades, but didn't say Scandinavia was initiate.
Mm-hmm. Well, he wasn't so happy about Sweden because of their neutrality. And, you know, if you promised the German organization certain things the way Switzerland did and the way Sweden did, then you were not invaded, and you were left free to accomplish some of those things that Germany needed. As far as Norway and Denmark, they were overrun, and other, I don't know about Iceland, you know, in a way so small, but, you know, and not populous and geographically out of the way. But Norway had its own form of Nazi sympathizing government, and Quisling was the leader of that, and his name is significant with traitor, you know, and he was met his just deserts after the war. And when it came to Denmark, there was a big resistance, and they were overcome, but they really fought back. When it came to, well, you see, Finland is not considered part of the Scandinavian countries. Popularly it is, but DK gives them, the Finns, a completely different set of rays. When it comes to the Scandinavian countries, the two signs at least are Cancer personality and Libra soul sign. And there's no question but the second and the seventh ray are very prominent. You know, the second ray is kind of self-protective, and in that case, some of these countries didn't go as far as they should have, DK is saying. But the seventh ray has to do with aligning with the New World Order, and it holds much promise in the future. A lot of people feel about Finland, which is the only Capricorn soul country that, caught as it was between invading Russia and, you know, and unable to get any help from the Allies because of Sweden's attitude, not letting the help come across their nation because of their agreed upon neutrality with Germany, that they apparently aligned with the Finns aligned with Germany to protect themselves with from Russia, but then later reversed that whole thing, and you know, Germany was much hated, but it was just a question of survival. But again, they have a lot of seventh ray, but they are not a Scandinavian country in terms of how they are seen esoterically. So are there any initiate nations? Well, of course, maybe various partisans of the different nations say, yeah, my country went through a great initiation. And the people in Finland certainly say that about their Capricorn soul, because basically they came out of it and they entirely paid their war reparations, and like I say, the only nation given that had the sign of initiation on the soul level. But you know, some nations are closer than others, and I would say that the Scandinavian countries, with their emphasis upon peace through Libra, are nations which together, he doesn't even differentiate them, nations which together are quite close to the possibility of the first initiation, I would say. Okay. All right. Let's our formula here. I'm taking a first ray glamour, dictatorship, rulership, and wide control. Those are exactly the words that DK uses. This kind of thing is rising in the world today. And we have to realize that most members of the Black Lodge have first ray souls, or a powerful first sub-ray in their soul nature. That's what DK said about everybody that surrounded Hitler, a powerful first sub-ray. Because not all of them were first ray souls, obviously, you know, like Goebbels, he was on the third ray, and you could see, and Hitler was on the first ray, and Himmler was on the seventh ray, you know, but the first ray was the sub-ray. And whenever they're, you know, just if you want a chilling experience and you haven't seen it yet, I think her name is Reifenschneider. I think something like that. Leni Reifenschneider, something like that. Back in the early 30s, she made a documentary called The Triumph of the Will. And it was a depiction of the absolute hysteria of the Nuremberg rallies, you know, 85 years ago or more. And it was when Germany was seized by this impression from the Black Lodge, and really they were completely overcome by their own negativity and by that impression. They're a Pisces nation on the outer level, and therefore very negative, says the Tibetan. So that's rising again. And the negative, unthinking people who are representatives of the age of Pisces, and the great majority are found in the United States now, which is the heir to the Piscean sixth ray civilization, says the Tibetan, are unfortunately in the same position as the negative German people were when the forces of darkness saw the opportunity to psychically control. Same thing is being applied in the United States, and the only hope for salvation there is the fact that over the years, a counterforce on the second ray has been built up to a considerable extent, and we'll see whether the lesson of the Second World War especially, but really the entire Great War, whether that has been learned or not. So, you know, the whole dedication of certain types to the destruction of democracy is in full swing. And that's why this glamour of dictatorship, rulership, and wide control is so dangerous at this time. So let's meditate accordingly. And I'm not sure, Tuya, are you in a position where you can do this, or are you not in a position where you can? Maybe not. Maybe not.
I am not.
Okay. All right, friends. So there are quite a few of us, and but let's just think of us. If you have I'm not going to name everybody right now. It's 40 something people, and it's too much right now. But think about all of us gathered from different countries, working together in a unity as an instrument for the dissipation of glamour. This first ray glamour that basically has the objective of destroying democracy. So we are assembled in a way when we do this kind of dissipation to protect that second ray system of governance, democracy, from these egocentric attitudes. And this is serious business, so we need our protection using the protective formula and the cross of divinity, the long-armed cross that involves brow, heart, left eye, right eye. And we trace light as we do this, and we use the protective mantram, the protective formula. As a soul, I work in light, and darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light. I work, and from that point, I never move. So as we trace the light individually, the greater cross appears before the entire group and represents protection for the entire group. We now, as customarily, blend three lights together as one. The light of matter rising to the mental plane and the light of the mental plane to become one. Focusing upon the plane of mind. And we reach upward to feel the light of the soul. We imagine it. We bring it down imaginatively to the lower mental plane, probably the fourth level. Light of the soul, light of mind, and the light of matter, especially etheric, physical. And from this triple light, our searchlight will grow and be extended. We can think, we can discern, we can vitalize the thinking and discernment. And we say, the light is one, and in that light shall we see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. And then we use the formula. And as we do so, we're visualizing the great searchlight arising from our triple light as one and turning to the astral plane. This light is turned now upon the astral plane. We try to imagine that first. Thereby affecting our desires and our aspirations, our emotions. And so we say, radiance are we and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth, the inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus, with the light we work and turn the darkness into day. So we're going to utter the word of power, but first we think about this glamour a little bit and see what it has done to humanity over the centuries and millennia. The glamour of dictatorship, rulership, and wide control. First ray glamour, dictatorship, rulership, and wide control. Now, the words of power. And as we do this, we visualize the light, our searchlight, penetrating into the glamour and producing its weakening and dissipation. The power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of dictatorship, rulership, and wide control. The power of our united light negates the quality of this glamour from affecting humanity. The power of our united light destroys the life behind this glamour. Now we'll spend 5 minutes of silence and intensity of purpose whilst this work is seen as proceeding. So we'll continue in our own way and mindful of the group to work with these words of power. And then we withdraw our beam back to the mantle plane, turning our attention away from the astral plane, redistributing the lights from whence they came. And we have the sense that some little bit of dissipation has occurred, some lifting of the veils upon truth and reality has occurred. And we persist in using our group beam when we come together, and when we're working on our own individual glamours, we'll have a meditation there too. And we'll also be using a beam, a dissipatory beam. So now we'll sound the Om 3 times, from mind, emotions to physical, and conclude this meditation. Thank you, everyone, for participating, thinking together about these things, and love and blessings from Olivia, Tuya, myself, and the whole communications team. And tomorrow we'll have the evening Soul of Nations, and Sunday the evening Attracting Financial Resources for Hierarchical Work. And both of those will be broadcasts at our usual YouTube station. So this will be ready before long when it's converted, and if you want to let your friends know that this kind of meditation is going on, please do. And they can tune in. They can tune in on what's happening here, and maybe it will be I think of value to them. Anyway, that's my hope. All the best, many blessings, lots of love. We'll see you a little later.